Dreamcast was a special system for me. My dad brought one home not very long after it launched, and I can just remember a big stack of games with things like Ready to Rumble, Sega Bass Fishing, and even a demo disc with games like Seaman and MDK2. But the one I really latched onto was Blue Stinger. The monsters were crazy. It was fast and loud and just really exciting. I remember it being super hard as a kid, and I never did make it very far. And really at this time, I felt like this was the future of gaming. It launched at the start of a new console generation and tried to push survival horror somewhere new. But what was Blue Stinger? So this game came out in 1999 for the Sega Dreamcast. In Japan it was published by Sega, but over here in the West Activision handled it. It showed up right at the beginning of the system's life. In North America, it was part of that launch lineup. For a lot of people, this was one of the first games they ever saw running on a Dreamcast. And when you actually look at what it is, it lands somewhere between action-adventure and survival horror. You're on this big island facility. You're exploring, fighting monsters, picking up weapons, managing your items, unlocking doors. The bones of late 90s horror are there, but it moves with a different kind of energy. It feels like it wants you always pushing forward. The environments are fully 3D. The camera gives you space, cutscenes are woven in pretty regularly, and there's this clear effort to make the whole thing feel cinematic. In North America, the camera was shifted to sit behind the player. In the Japanese version, it was actually fixed camera angles. And that choice alone changes how it plays. You're closer to the action, you can see more of what's around you, movement feels a bit more direct. The studio behind it was Climax Graphics. They were formed specifically to make this game. A lot of the team had worked on Dark Savior at Climax Entertainment, and when this project started taking shape, they pulled together a focus group to build something for the new hardware. At the center of it was Shinya Nishigaki. He produced it, he co-wrote it. This was very much his project. He founded Climax Graphics because he wanted to chase cinematic ideas in games. And you can feel that when you play Blue Stinger. The way scenes are framed, the way characters enter, the pacing of certain moments. There's a lot of intention there. Nishigaki talked about drawing from Western action films like Spielberg, John Carpenter, Joe Dante. That influence shows up in how the game presents itself. It wants to feel staged. It wants to feel like something you're watching unfold while still controlling it. There's scale in the presentation and movement. There's this sense that it's reaching for something a lot bigger. They even brought in some people outside of the studio from the West for things like creature design, the camera angles, and storyboarding. There was a big push to shape this into something that felt international. Development actually started before the Dreamcast was even public. Pre-production began in 1996. At first it was planned for the Sega Saturn, then Sega shifted focus to the new hardware and the project restarted for the Dreamcast in 97. After Sega approved the prototype, full production moved forward with that new direction. And that timing there is pretty important. The Dreamcast was Sega's fresh start, new hardware, new momentum, a chance to put something modern in people's hands. Blue Stinger ended up being one of those games helping define that early impression. Sega encouraged projects that could show off what the system could render. These larger 3D spaces, detailed models, cinematic presentation blended directly into gameplay. The team really leaned into that. They built levels meant to feel expansive. They emphasized visual variety and pushed for transition between gameplay and cutscenes that felt fluid.
Dogs, thank God you're here. Ready to pay off your debt? Dang, he's alive! I was hoping you'd be dead so that I'd be debt-free.
Development on Blue Stinger took about 2 years, and from everything that's been said about it, it was a grind. The team wasn't huge, and they were building this thing while the hardware itself was still kind of settling into what it was going to be. Long hours were just part of it. There was a lot of pressure there. This was early Dreamcast. These games were going to shape how people saw the system. The Dreamcast had the ability to run games at a higher frame rate, but Blue Stinger sits at 30 frames, and when you play it, you can kind of see why. There's a lot happening on screen at times. Multiple enemies, effects flying around, bigger spaces that most horror games just weren't doing at the time. The focus feels like it was on feeling the screen, keeping things active, making sure everything held together. Some of the more advanced hardware features just didn't end up being the priority. The team seemed more concerned with getting the environments running smoothly and keeping the presentation stable. You can feel that emphasis when you move through the island. It's built to feel like one connected place. And that film influence carried into the audio too. The soundtrack aimed for something closer to a movie score. Orchestral themes were recorded with a full ensemble. The voice acting was done entirely in English, even for the Japanese release, with subtitles added in there. That choice alone tells you a lot about what they were reaching for.
R305.
You're Dr. Jacob?
When you sit with all that for a second, the long development push, the hardware decisions, the cinematic ambition, the whole idea of what Blue Stinger was trying to do starts to become a little bit more clear. It showed up at the start of a new console generation. It was built by a studio formed specifically to chase a bigger idea. Film language runs through it. It carried the responsibility of being part of the Dreamcast's first impressions. When you actually start playing Blue Stinger, the first thing that stands out is how close everything feels. As I mentioned, the camera in the Western version sits right behind you. You're moving through fully 3D spaces, and you can see what's in front of you pretty clearly. The island feels open, the rooms are big, hallways are stretched out, and the enemies are just there in the space with you. You're not peeking around corners or checking different camera angles as much as you're stepping into rooms and immediately sizing things up. The movement has a lot of weight to it. It still carries that late 90s foundation. But you're walking around in open areas, turning, backing up, adjusting your angle while lining up a shot. When something charges at you, you see it the whole way. You're reacting in the moment. And the combat builds on that. You have guns, and then you've got melee weapons, and they all behave differently. Some swing wide, some hit really hard. Some leave you standing there just a little longer after the animation finishes. That little pause is really important in the combat here. If you get greedy, certain enemies will clip you right as you're recovering. So even when you feel like you're equipped with strong weapons or something, you're still thinking about distance, thinking about when to commit to an attack. And then money ties into everything. When you defeat enemies, they drop coins. You physically have to walk over and pick them up off the floor. Around the island, there's a bunch of vending machines. You can buy ammo, healing items, even weapons. So fights start to feel connected to what comes after. You clear an area, grab the coins, and you're already thinking about the nearest machine. You're staying supplied as long as you keep moving. Healing really slows you down in specific moments. It's all food and drinks. When you use something, there's an animation. The character actually eats or drinks whatever it is you're eating. You're standing there while it plays out. Bigger meals heal more, but you're stuck in that animation longer. Drinks are quicker, but you don't get as much back. So in the middle of a big fight, you're making a call. Do I stand here and finish this hot dog, or do I chug this drink really fast to keep moving? There are also food plates hidden around, and in some vending machines, that permanently increase your max health. So exploration starts to feel rewarding in a very visible way. You find one of those and you feel it. It increases your health bar. Swimming is also something that I thought was really interesting, because you don't just push forward like you do in most games. You kind of have to push yourself in a rhythm. There's a cadence to it. If you want to dive, you have to stop and let Elliot actually sink, then start swimming again. You've got an air meter to think about too, so whenever you surface, you actually have to manage it. Just treading in the water takes input. You have to tap in a rhythm to stay afloat. It's not passive, you're constantly doing something for the swimming to work. Those sections add a bit of depth to the map. You're thinking about vertical space now, air, where you'll come up. It sticks with you because it feels a bit different than just running around the levels. And the game just kind of keeps flowing. Cutscenes pop in, but they don't pull you away for very long. You're back in control pretty quickly. Exploration rolls into combat, into a short cinematic moment, and then right back into movement. There's this steady forward motion the entire time. It really feels like Blue Stinger wants to keep everything active. You're moving, you're swinging weapons, you're picking up coins, you're hitting vending machines, choosing when to eat, you're managing breath underwater. Your hands are always doing something in this game. There isn't really much space to freeze up. And that gives this whole game this constant, almost restless energy once you're deep into it. Hey, just real quick, if you made it this far into the video, I really appreciate you hanging out with me for a bit. It means a lot that you're willing to sit with these older games and just kind of revisit them with me. That's what the save room is all about, taking a second to slow down and look back at what these games are trying to do. If you're enjoying the video so far, consider subbing. There's a lot of content on the channel already like this and a lot more coming. Also consider leaving a like and a comment. Let me know what you thought about Blue Stinger when it came out, or if this is the first time you've heard of it. I'd love to know your opinion on it. Also want to give a shout out to all the members for the channel. They're up on the screen here. As always, it blows my mind that you all want to support the channel this way, but I really do appreciate you. But let's get back into Blue Stinger and look at the character swapping and the tone for the game, because it's kind of crazy.
Hey, Tim. What's up, Elliot? Why do you think Chimera Tech built such a huge research lab on such a tiny island?
Once Elliot and Dogs are both in play, the rhythm shifts depending on who you're using, and you feel that pretty quickly. Elliot moves faster, there's more bounce to him, and he can carry both short-range and long-range weapons at the same time, so you're not constantly pausing to rethink your setup. You can pop something from a distance and then immediately close in. It feels smooth. He stays in motion pretty much constantly. He's also the one handling the swimming sections, so all the breath management underwater rhythm from earlier, that belongs to him. When you're controlling Elliot, the game feels more mobile. You're covering ground, you're adjusting on the fly. Dogs is a bit different. He's heavier, he's slower when he turns and moves, there's a weight to him. He can only equip one weapon at a time, so you're committing to that choice. His weapons hit a bit harder though, his melee swings feel really solid, and he can block. That alone changes how you approach certain fights. You're not always stepping back or trying to run around to line up a shot. Sometimes you just plant yourself and take the hit, then answer it. And then there's the shirts. Karate, sumo, and wrestling. These aren't just cosmetic items. They change how he fights. Different stances, different attack strings. A sumo shirt makes you want to plant yourself and just e-Honda the enemies. A karate shirt feels quicker and a little bit tighter. You end up playing Dogs differently depending on what he's wearing. And it goes beyond combat too. Elliot's personality carries into the way the scenes feel. He's got a lot of energy. He reacts to things with a little more expression. Dogs comes off more serious, more restrained. That tone leaks into gameplay. The same hallway can feel slightly different depending on who you're walking it with. So over time, the pace of the game shifts back and forth. With Elliot, you're moving through these areas quickly, swapping weapons, adjusting mid-fight. With Dogs, fights can slow down a bit. You step in, you block, you swing, you recover. You start to feel those two rhythms living side by side. And because the story separates them at points, that rhythm resets every so often. You get comfortable with one tempo, then you're adjusting to another. It keeps things moving. It keeps you thinking about who you're using, not just where you're going. Blue Stinger doesn't sit on one single cadence for very long. It drifts between them, and that drift becomes part of how the whole game feels. There's something else that starts to stand out the longer you play this game: the tone. Blue Stinger opens on a pretty heavy premise: a bioweapon outbreak, an island locked down, creatures running around where they shouldn't be, people caught in it. But the way it carries that setup feels different. The dialogue is really big. Characters don't mumble through scenes, they react. They raise their voices, lines land with emphasis. You can hear the performance in it. There's a lot of personality in almost every conversation.
It won't work. You can't hit her.
What is that thing?
Nephilim.
Nephilim?
She's harmless.
Elliot jokes, he flirts, he throws out lines with this animated energy. Dogs carries more grit, but even then, there's weight behind what he says.
Let's go to Rat's place.
Rat's place? The bar where you ran up your unpaid bill?
Scenes feel staged. You can almost picture the actors in a booth leaning into the delivery. And since all of it was recorded in English for every region, there's this late 90s dub quality to it that really sticks. Certain lines just live in your head after you hear them once.
Your name is on their blacklist. You're pretty famous.
God damn son of a bitch.
The music pushes that feeling even further. During big moments, you'll get these orchestral swells that feel pulled from a movie intro. Then you're back into control and the tempo lifts again. There's movement in it, forward motion, and in certain areas, especially the seasonal sections, it leans into that holiday vibe. Christmas decorations hanging in the background, lights up in areas that are supposed to be under lockdown, tracks playing that feel festive while monsters are roaming around. It gives the island this strange brightness. You're walking through labs and shopping areas with wreaths on the wall. Enemies drop coins that bounce across the floor and chime. Vending machines glow. Characters shout during fights. The score rises and keeps things moving. There's an arcade pulse running underneath everything. You clear a group of enemies and coins scatter. You scoop them up, you move on, hit a vending machine, restock, push forward. The combat rolls into a cutscene and then right back into gameplay. The rhythm rarely dips for long. Even the animations feel committed. When Elliot eats, he really goes at it. When Dog swings, he plants himself. Enemies react hard when they get hit. It all feels very expressive. So the atmosphere carries this lively, slightly camp edge the whole time. The island is in crisis, but the game keeps its energy up. Holiday music during monster fights ends up being one of the things people remember the most. Dialogue lines stick because of how they're delivered. The outbreak plot keeps moving, and the presentation keeps things animated right alongside it. It feels very Dreamcast, very Sega. Bright, a little theatrical, full of personality. And once you lock into that vibe, the whole tone starts to make sense. It has this late 90s arcade cabinet energy, just with monsters and vending machines. So, for the story, the game opens with a meteor falling from the sky and crashing into a place called Dinosaur Island. And that name is kinda on the nose, because this island is the actual impact site from the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs. That history is just sitting there in the background before the game even gets moving. In 2018, another meteor hits the same region. When it crashes down, it throws up this massive energy barrier around the island. Nothing gets in and nothing gets out. Research facilities, shopping centers, docks, labs, everything inside that perimeter is sealed off. Elliot Blad is nearby when all this happens. He's part of ESSER, a sea rescue group, but he's technically off duty right now. He's on vacation with his friend Tim. When the meteor hits and everything spirals, Tim gets caught in it, and he ends up trapped in stasis. Elliot thinks he might be gone. He's not sure if he's alive or dead. That drives him forward from the start. He's trying to understand what happened. He's trying to find answers and trying to help Tim. While he's moving along the docks after the impact, he encounters something called Nephilim. Nephilim appears as this glowing presence. She communicates telepathically. She guides Elliot deeper into the island. At first, she's kind of mysterious. You don't fully know what she is. You just know she's connected to whatever just fell out of the sky. As Elliot pushes deeper into the island, the situation becomes a bit more clear. Creatures are everywhere. Mutated animals, altered humans. The island houses a biotech company called Kimra. They had been studying material from the original meteorite, something called Dinocyte. It carries genetic properties that can mutate living organisms. Kimra built their research around it, they experimented with it, and the new meteor impact pushes everything over the edge. Elliot connects with Janine King through a radio. She's part of the island's security force. She feeds him information, helps guide him through different facilities, and stays in contact while things unravel. There's a history between her and Dogs Bauer that you find out about later. But Dogs enters the picture pretty early. He rescues Elliot and becomes his partner through most of the game. He's lived around the island, he knows parts of it. He knows some of the people tied to it. He feels rooted there in a way Elliot doesn't. As they dig deeper into Kimmer's labs, more of the truth comes out. The new meteor from 2018 contains Dinocyte. The original meteor from millions of years ago carried it also. That substance can completely reshape life. The creatures roaming the island are the result of exposure and experimentation. At one point, Elliot gets infected himself. So you see him start to mutate, his body begins to change. There's a moment where Dogs prepares himself for the possibility that he might have to put Elliot down. That scene carries a bit of weight. Eventually they locate a serum inside the facility that reverses the mutation and Elliot stabilizes.
If you change again, I'll kill you.
Nephilim's role becomes a lot clearer as everything builds toward the end. She's connected to the second meteor. She represents another force tied to whatever has been sitting beneath the island for millions of years. She guides Elliot through the final stages of the fight. She moves towards her true form. Kimra's research spirals into something a lot bigger. They create a cloned version of the Dinocyte entity. Elliot and Dogs fight their way through the facility to destroy it. Nephilim reunites with her true body and destroys the original Dinocyte presence. The energy barrier falls, the island begins to calm down. Tim is revealed to still be alive, having been held in stasis the entire time. Elliot finally gets that resolution he's been chasing. At the very end, Nephilim transforms herself back into a meteor and launches into space. The cycle feels larger than just Dinosaur Island. The story stretches beyond the island itself. When you step back and look at the whole thing, it covers a lot of ground. Ancient extinction, corporate biotech research, alien genetic material, mutation, survival, rescue, containment, meteor cycles repeating across time. At the center of it all, though, you've got Elliot trying to save a friend, dogs holding steady when things start slipping, Janine guiding from the other side of a radio, and Nephilim acting as this strange thread connecting everything together. The island stays chaotic the entire way through. There's labs to shut down, creatures to get rid of, and answers to uncover. By the time it's wrapped up, you've gone from shoreline disaster to an alien confrontation without the game ever dialing its scope down. Blue Stinger's story reaches really wide. When Blue Stinger launched in '99, it landed right at the front of a new console generation. For a lot of people, this was their first impression on the console. You'd walk into a store and see Sonic Adventure on one kiosk, maybe Power Stone on another, and then Blue Stinger sitting there with monsters, gunfire, big cutscenes, and a fully 3D island you could move around in. It had presence, it felt really loud, it felt like something trying to show off what this new hardware could do. Reception at the time landed somewhere in the middle. Reviews weren't brutal, but they weren't glowing either. A lot of outlets called it decent. Some pointed out stiff animation, some mentioned uneven voice acting, and some felt the tone didn't fully lock in with what people expected from survival horror. The scores hovered in that respectable but not explosive range also. It wasn't positioned as a must-play masterpiece, it was just part of the lineup. The sales kind of followed a similar path. In Japan, it moved a solid chunk of units early on, and then just kind of slowed down. Overseas though, it did a lot better, especially in North America where it had that launch window visibility. There was around 500,000 copies sold worldwide by most counts. For a brand new studio and a brand new console, that put it on the board. Sega even showed interest in a sequel at one point. That never materialized once the team shifted towards Illbleed and the Dreamcast momentum just started slipping. And that context is pretty important. The Dreamcast itself didn't have a long life. It burned really bright and then faded fast. By the early 2000s, the PS2 had taken over. Survival horror kept evolving. Resident Evil tightened its pacing, Silent Hill leaned further into atmosphere and psychological weight. Cameras, tone, and structure across the genre kept refining. Blue Stinger stayed exactly where it launched. It didn't get a follow-up to reshape its identity. It didn't get a sequel to polish its edges. It exists as that 1999 version of an idea, a studio reaching for scale, a console trying to make a statement, and a genre still stretching its boundaries. Over time, the way people talked about it changed though. Modern videos on the game usually describe it as odd and wild, confusing in places, sometimes unintentionally funny. Dialogue and plot beats that feel like a late-night B-movie. The Christmas decorations during an outbreak, coins scattering from monsters, Elliot shouting mid-fight, it sticks in people's heads. You'll see people call it a time capsule, simply because of the energy it brings. It carries that late 90s Sega pulse, these bright colors, big reactions, arcade flow blended into something labeled survival horror. When people revisit it now, that blend stands out even more. And in genre terms, that's part of its place. At launch, it carried the survival horror label. It had monsters, item management, locked doors. The structure fit the surface description. Once you actually play it, you feel how much action and momentum live inside it though. It moves and pushes differently, it leans into activity. That gave it a strange spot in horror history. Blue Stinger didn't redefine the genre or become a blueprint. It sat slightly to the side, a branch that could have grown into something else if the console had lasted longer, or if the studio had doubled down on it. Instead, it became something a bit quieter, smaller. A cult memory. People who owned a Dreamcast in '99 remember it. They remember the opening Meteor, Dogs' shirts, they remember the music in the general store, and feeling like this was the future because it looked bigger than what they were used to. You still see posts from people saying it was one of their first Dreamcast games, that they didn't fully understand it at the time, or that it felt wild and different, and that they went back years later and realized how strange it actually was. It lives right there. A snapshot. A game tied directly to the hardware it launched on, a studio forming around a single ambitious project, and a genre experimenting in public. When you zoom out, Blue Stinger feels like 1999 distilled into a disc. These giant ideas, big swings, cinematic ambition, arcade rhythm. A console trying to prove itself. I don't think it collapses under its ambition. It just stayed in the year it was born. And because of that, it's worth remembering. For what it represents. A moment when survival horror still had room to stretch in strange directions. When Sega put something bold on the table at launch. A moment when a brand new studio tried to fuse movie-scale arcade energy and monster chaos into one game. That's Blue Stinger's legacy. It began with the Dreamcast, and it just never really left. When I think about Blue Stinger now, or really any of these old games I talk about, I don't really think in terms of scores or rankings or where it sits on some list. I think about being a kid in front of a Dreamcast with my dad. This game is one of my core memories. I can still picture the controller in my hands, that big white controller with the memory card snapped into the back. And not just any memory card, the VMU, the Visual Memory Unit. It had that little screen, little buttons on it. It would light up, it would beep, it felt futuristic. It slid right into the controller and showed little icons and mini animations depending on what game you were playing. Some games even had tiny mini games that you could play directly on it. You could pop it out and carry it around like this little digital pet thing. As a kid, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I remember asking my dad to take the VMU out of the controller when we'd leave the house and go somewhere. Because in my head, I was convinced I could somehow play Blue Stinger on that tiny screen. I didn't fully understand how it worked, I just knew it was connected to the game, so I figured if I had it with me, I could still play the game. That's how big this felt at the time. Blue Stinger and the Dreamcast in general felt like the future, especially to kids. It felt loud and huge, these full 3D spaces, big monsters. It felt like games had just taken a leap. And when I look back at it now, that's what stands out more than anything, the ambition. You could feel the team reaching, trying to fuse arcade energy with monster horror, trying to stage big cinematic moments on brand new hardware, and trying to pack systems and ideas into something that would make people stop and stare at a Dreamcast kiosk. Sure, it's messy and loud and it swings wide, but it feels exactly like 1999. It feels like launch energy, like a console trying to announce itself. A studio throwing everything it had into one island. Blue Stinger was built purely on impact, not longevity. Around walking into a room, seeing that white console running something bright and chaotic and fully 3D, and feeling like you were stepping into a new era. For me, it's tied to that memory. The controller, the VMU, my dad sat next to me, and that island loading in. That's what Blue Stinger was. A launch-era burst of ambition. A weird, energetic, fully committed swing at something bigger. And for a kid who thought a tiny screen inside a memory card meant the future was already here, it absolutely worked. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, I really appreciate you hanging out with me for a bit. If you liked the video and you haven't yet, consider subbing and becoming part of the save room. There's already a pretty deep library on the channel and there's a lot more coming. This whole thing is about preserving these moments, these weird experiments, these launch era swings that might have gotten left behind. Go ahead and leave a like if you enjoyed it, and drop a comment too. I'd love to hear your memories of Blue Stinger. Was this one of your first Dreamcast games? Did you play it back in the day, or is this your first time even seeing it? And if you're on mobile, consider hitting the hype button. It gives the video hype points, which essentially tells the algorithm, hey, this video is good, more people should see it. It's a way that you can directly help grow the video. This was a special era of gaming, and I'm always happy to revisit it. But that's gonna wrap up Blue Stinger. Let me know what other games you'd like to see get added to the save room. Thanks again for hanging out, and as always, I'll see y'all later.
This might be the last battle.